Good morning, afternoon, evening, or from whatever time zone you may be calling us in from today. Thank you for joining. My name is Rebecca Cronin, and I'm one of the Customer Success Managers here with the Altair Data Analytics team. Now, some of you might recognize my voice or perhaps see my name within the user community. Part of our opportunity here is to provide these online live Q&A sessions. We obviously start the topic with what has been voted. In this case, this is a popular topic that was asked, so we didn't have a chance to vote. But here, the customer success team, we're here to help you, get you connected to the user community. If you haven't joined, really do encourage you to do so. It's a great opportunity to see how your fellow peers are utilizing the solution. It's always a great way to participate. And if you have any questions regarding the user community or even to our Altair One, you can reach us at da-csm@altair.com. So a little bit of quick housekeeping for those that are new. You should see a control panel. In there, there's a handout section. It is a copy of today's PowerPoint for you to download. One of the slides within the PowerPoint does contain a list of helpful web links and resources. So again, we're very excited that you're joining us today for our Ask the Expert session. Our goal is that provide you an open time slot where you can freely drop in, ask any live questions. They do not have to be about the topic that we are presenting today, which we're covering Excel Worksheet Design, also known as Excel trapping. So in that control panel, you should see a question section or chat where you'll be able to submit a question. And again, like I said, it does not have to be about today's topic. It could be any other questions you may have, not only around Monarch itself, but also Monarch Server, automation component, or even Report Warehouse or Content Server if you have those other type of questions. We'll do our best to get to those questions after our presentation here. And if we don't get a chance to address them, we will follow up directly in a separate email. For those questions that you do submit in the chat, if you don't say for it to be private, we will address it for the entire audience to be able to learn from what's been asked. So at this time, I'd like to introduce you to our expert, Steve Caiels. Steve is one of our senior professional service consultants. He's worked for over 29 years in various technical support roles, including Altair, which is 20 plus years. Steve started with a technical support engineer, promoted into our pre-sales consult and training, to his now current role of the senior professional service consultant. Steve has provided tremendous assistance to both our customers as well as our own internal teams. Some of you might have even had the opportunity to work with him. So with no further ado, I'm going to turn over a presentation to Steve, where we're going to begin our topic with Excel trapping. So let's find you here, Steve, make you presenter.
Great. Okay. Great. So
I see your screen with looks like an Excel document open.
Yeah, lovely. Thanks very much. So yeah, as Rebecca mentioned, today's main topic is the Excel Worksheet Design, and also a contrast as to why you might want to use the Excel Worksheet Design over the database mode. So Monarch has been around for a long time. Monarch Classic has been able to open up Excel files for a long time, but only using database mode. And database mode basically needs a very structured Excel file. So you can see this one here is just a little preview. This is fairly structured. There is a little bit of, I suppose, strange structure here where you can see we have a merged cell. So that's not really a problem, but effectively, it's rows and columns. So this would be suitable for database mode, but I thought we'd start off with this one so that I can contrast database mode and worksheet design mode and go through some of the advantages and disadvantages without getting into the sort of format where worksheet design mode really is the only way to go forward. Excuse me. So the first thing to mention is that Monarch Classic only has database design mode. It doesn't have the worksheet design mode. Data Prep Studio has both modes. There's a small difference between the database mode between Classic and Data Prep Studio as well. So for those of you that are sort of still using Classic for most of the work, or maybe have an older version that doesn't have Data Prep Studio or visual processes, we'll take a look at how we can do this in database mode to start with. So I'm just going to open this one up in Classic to start with, and sort of contrast and show some of the limitations that we have in Classic mode. So you can see all that's done is it's opened up, it's got the path to the file that we're going to use. So just to recap that quickly, I guess I should mention, if you are opening this up in Classic, you would need to do a file open and then make sure you choose database. So although of course, we might consider Excel to be a spreadsheet, not a database in the traditional sense, in terms of Classic, we regard all of these formatted data structures as database mode. So we do file open database rather than report. Choose the file we want. And I think probably the biggest restriction, particularly in Classic, of using database mode is you can only take data from one place at a time. Meant to actually show this in the preview here. You can see that we've got data 1 and data 2. So this Excel sheet has two different tabs, data 1 and data 2. What we can't see on the preview, so I need to open it up into Excel, is there's also a named range here called data 3. Data 3, you can see, is just basically a subset of the data 2 tab. So Monarch Classic can open up either from the sheet name directly, or it can open up from a named range within that sheet. So what we see here in our table selection are the two sheet names with the $ after it, and the data 3 is the named range. But significantly, I can only choose one of these at a time. I can't do a control click or a shift click or anything like that. It's a unique selection. They're all exactly the same structure, so it doesn't make a difference which one I choose, but it is just one at a time. There's a little preview here that shows the structure underneath it, but you can't do anything to that. It's just for information. So we choose our data source. We select our data source. And then we can do a define and import, or we can just do an import. If you do a define and import, it gives you the option of you're selecting or deselecting field names. You can rename these fields as you bring them in if you want to. If you don't, if you just do an import directly, you skip over this screen and it takes you straight into the data itself. So there is one little bit of work we need to do here. Again, to remind ourselves of how this data looks on the way in. You can see these are merged cells in Excel. So even on the preview there, you can see they're all merged together. Monarch Classic doesn't automatically take these merged cells into account. So of course, what we're going to assume here is that these merged client and account number belong to all of these transactions. So we can double click on the client, and we can go to the advanced tab, and then we can use copy value from previous record. Do the same for the account number, and now you can see we've got the data in there. So database mode is pretty straightforward. Really, all I've done is clicked on select and sort of next a few times. Not really have to do anything too much to it. And if we didn't have these merged cells, then I think it's really intuitive. The biggest disadvantage, as I mentioned, is that you can only take data from one data source at a time. So if I wanted to extract data from both of these tabs, I'd have to have two different sessions. The other limitation of database mode is that it uses the data source, in other words, the name of the sheet in this case, or potentially the name of the range, and the data structure are sort of fixed and defined as part of that definition. So if I save the model file here, and let's go to, where did I put it? There, sorry. We'll call it database, and save the project file. And then close down Monarch. So just to quickly recap the difference between a model file and a project. For those familiar with Monarch, you'll remember the model file contains all of the extraction definitions. So in terms of a database, really pretty much all it contains is a list of the fields and any particular structures, the fields that you select. If you've done any filters or calculations or summaries, they're all saved as part of the model file. But the model file doesn't contain a reference to the data. The project file contains a reference to the data, so it knows that this model file should be associated with the format 1, and it will then have the path to the model file. So it doesn't contain the data, doesn't contain the model file or the Excel data itself. It just literally contains a path to those two files, and other things like the date format. Actually, no, so I think that's part of the model file. So other things like project exports that you've defined, which window you have open when you saved it, which view you're in. A couple of extra things like that are saved in the project file. I actually meant to do a filter here, so I'm just going to quickly open up that project file again quickly and add a filter and then resave it based on this amount column. So I'm going to create a new formula-based filter, and I'm just going to say my amount field is greater than 0. So that filter is not active by default, always catches me out, that one. So I've got a filter, but it's not turned on. You can see we have some negative values in here. But if I drop down and select this, I didn't name it, so it's just called filter. But there you can see the active filter now gets rid of those 2 negative values. That becomes important on the next example. So I'm just going to save the model and save the project. I've already named them, so I don't need to save them again. So pretty straightforward, I think. The advantage of Excel of Excel database mode is that you have very little to do. You really just have to point to the data, and then everything's taken care of. Where it becomes more of a problem is if you have multiple data sources. We'll need to resolve that in Data Prep Studio. But even in Classic, it becomes an issue if the structure of this changes. So we have a couple of different examples here. The database format 1, you can see, has a field called AMT, whereas database format 2 has a field called amount. So the model is expecting a different set of field names to the field names we're going to give it. So what I'm going to do is to just rename this field here, this file here, sorry, so that the project will no longer be able to find it. And then when I try and open up the project file, it will complain that it can't find format 1, and it will give me an opportunity to instead select file number 2 with format 2. So if your incoming structure is changing, as we saw, we've got the AMT field changing to amount, you'll get this error message here, or this warning telling you or asking you if you'd like to correct it. So if you're using Monarch interactively, you're actually using a Monarch either Classic or Data Prep Studio session, by sitting there with the mouse, then it's not too much of a problem. But you can imagine if you're trying to automate this, or use Automator, then that's going to be an issue because you won't have the potential to click on yes here and correct the mapping. So automation is pretty much always a problem if your structure's changing. There are a couple of things we can do, which I'll come on to. But here you see I've clicked yes to fix it. The reason I wanted to create that filter is because it becomes important what we do here. So it's warning me that it can't find the AMT field, which we know because it's now called amount. But I've got a couple of ways of fixing this, or a couple of I can't think of the word there. A couple of effects that we need to do if we're going to fix this. So I want to select the amount field so that I bring this into my data. If I still call it amount, which you can see it just copies the field name here. If we look at the filter here, you can see my filter is not going to work because my filter is looking for the AMT field. Obviously, that's not a problem if you just got one filter because you can change it. But if you've got lots of calculations and filters based on calculations and summaries, you obviously don't want to be having to make all of these changes. So it's useful sometimes to actually just make sure, regardless of what your data is called coming in, if you just make sure you always use the same names here each time, then everything will continue to work. So of course, if the data is changing in terms of the number of fields, if you've got fields absolutely missing, then of course you're not going to be able to resolve it like that. But if it's just a case of the field names changing, make sure that you've got these set to what they were when you built all your filters and everything. And now you can see this is no longer in red. This is going to work fine. So not too much of a problem as long as you remember to do that mapping on the way in. I'm going to close that again and have a look at the next sort of changed structure. Format 3, we've gone back to the AMT. I didn't save the model, so the model is looking for AMT again now, which is good. But you can see the data has changed. Instead of being data 1, data 2, and having the named range of data 3, this now just has a single sheet called data 4. And again, in Monarch Classic and in database mode in general, the sheet name or the named range is part of the definition. So again, if I open up this project now, it's going to complain that it can't find file 1, which we know. This time I'm going to open up format 3. We get the same warning, just saying that something's gone wrong. But this time, all of my fields are invalid because it's looking for data 1. You can see up here in the path here. I'm not sure it's going to show on this resolution, but on the end of this path, it's telling me that it's looking for data 1, which was the sheet I selected. And obviously that's not working, so I've got nothing here at all. So slightly different resolution this time. Here I need to change the data source. You can see here it's looking for data 1, but in this case I need to choose data 4. And then everything else works after that. Okay. And again, I'd go in and use the dittos here to resolve that. So that's a quick look at the database using database mode. And worksheet design mode, the topic of this session, is not available in Classic. So I just wanted to review this in Classic to start with quickly. This worksheet one we're going to come on to later on. There's no point in looking at that in Classic because we can't do it. So let's just very quickly do this in Data Prep Studio instead. So I'm going to take this back and call it database mode format 1 again. And this time I'm going to open with Data Prep Studio. So it's going to be similar. The interface, of course, is different. And the way it asks this question is a bit different. So now we have the option in Data Prep Studio of using worksheet design mode or database mode. I'm just going to cancel that down a second rather than use this message and come in the open data instead. So if we do open data and select spreadsheet, you can see here are the two different modes. So worksheet design will come on to. Microsoft Excel is the old database mode that's pretty similar to database mode in Classic. So if we drag it, or if we do the right click open from, basically this dialog box here is asking whether we want to use worksheet design mode or database mode. So you see we click no to open in database, therefore we click yes to open in worksheet design. I'm going to click no to start with, just to show you one quick difference here. Two differences actually, sorry. The first difference is that you can see data 3 is not showing up by default. So we need to click on this to show named ranges in order to see data 3, whereas in Classic it shows all of them straight away. The more significant and more useful difference is that we can select multiple tables in Data Prep Studio. So I can take data. Doesn't really make any sense to take data from data 3 in this case because we saw it's a copy of the top of data 2, but just to show that we can, I'll select all of these 3 different sources. The other worthy point here is that you can see that we can automatically sync columns. So this helps you if you're automating and your column names are changing. So we saw in Classic, when I tried to open up format 2 that had a different column name, I got the error. And there's no way of avoiding that error. So if we're automating it, the automation is going to fail. Whereas if I select this tick here, the automation can now survive and it will automatically and dynamically change the columns that it's exporting if you're automating it. But there is a warning here in that if the columns change, any functions you've got, like filtering or the Analyze tab or appends or anything like that, they're going to fail if the field that you're trying to operate on is no longer available. So you can survive it, but anything extra you've done is going to get broken if it's depending on that field. So I'm not going to automatically refresh these. I'm going to take it in from spreadsheet 1, worksheet 1, load all of them. And you can see we get the 3 separate tables from our 3 different sources, which of course we can select all of these and we can then just append these based on any of the options. Basically, they're all the same. And then we can do the replace ditto. So you see we get to the same place pretty quickly. I think it's maybe a little bit nicer the way this is presented and the way you can drag and drop. And also, again, significantly, we can take data from all three of these data sources. So let me save this time the workspace instead of the, we don't have a model and a project in Data Prep Studio, we have a workspace instead. And again, I'll just go through the same couple of steps to show how we can resolve those changing format issues. Bearing in mind, I didn't select that tick to automatically resolve the issue for me. So I'm going to break this one so it can't find that anymore. This time open up my workspace. So it's the workspace is a bit like a project. It's going to go and try and open up the data source. So you see we got invalid file paths. So we need to find the missing file. This time I'm going to find number 2. So it finds the file now, but you can see the append is still broken at the moment. And if I click on any of these, again, these are still broken. So it's broken with the same problem that we saw previously. The AMT is not found because it's now called amount. So what I'm going to do instead is to come in here and edit the load options and just rescan the columns. And then it takes me through this wizard now. And again, this is significant if I'd have done filters or anything, any operation basically based on the amount. So it's very tempting just to tick this amount column. And if I tick the amount column, what you can see it's done is it's excluded the AMT column, and now it's added a new column called amount from that new data source. So this is going to break anything that we've done. So instead, what we should probably typically do is to tick the amount and say that maps to the amount column. So this is a sort of a bit like renaming it in your database options in Classic. And it now knows that what used to be called amount or what used to be called AMT is now called amount, and any subsequent operations are going to survive that. You need to do that on each one, unfortunately. I won't do it on all 3, but just to go through scan. And this is the quickest way. There are other ways of doing it, but this is the quickest way of doing it. And actually, I will do it on this one as well, sorry, because else it's not going to let me do the append. And now I've fixed all these, noticing we've now got the amount instead of the AMT. My append is now working straight away. So if we define the append, you can see it knows now it's dealing with the amount column. If I hadn't have renamed that, it would be trying to take the amount from data 1, for example, if I only fixed it in data 1, and then it would be looking for AMT here, which didn't exist. So you need to sort of work all the way through and fix that, but you can see it's possible to do. Pretty similar. I won't go through option number 3 in database mode because it's effectively exactly the same as Classic. So let's move on to the next stage. I'm just checking. I think the only question is regarding a recording at the moment, so I'll skip over that for now, and I'm sure Rebecca will answer that later. So, excuse me. Let's have a look at the same files, but this time using worksheet design mode. So we've already seen that worksheet design mode is not strictly necessary in order to bring this data in. We can do it in database mode, but there are advantages to using worksheet design mode, even if the data structure doesn't explicitly need it. So I'm going to say yes to worksheet design mode here. So the disadvantage of worksheet design mode is that it's only available in Data Prep Studio, which means you'll need to use a visual process if you're automating it, and you'll need to build a Data Prep Studio workspace rather than a classic model or a standard process if you are using older versions. But it is much richer. So there's a little bit more work to do up front, but it's a much richer set of features later on. So what we can see we're looking at here is the worksheet design, a little bit like report design that you're used to seeing in Classic or Data Prep Studio. And it's the same principle of creating traps and templates, but those principles are implemented in a slightly different way. But it's the same sort of thing here. What I'm going to do, I'll go through this fairly quickly, and then I'll review the worksheet design mode in slightly more detail on a spreadsheet that actually does need worksheet design mode. So I'm going to choose a column that allows me to differentiate between the headers. So I'm just going to do a right click, add trap on a numeric column. And you can see that's automatically selected all the numeric lines. And what it's actually done here, I'll just very quickly review it, is you can see it said the cell is a number. So therefore it doesn't highlight the first column. I'll review this in a bit more detail on the next example. Once we've put the trap in, we do a right click, add columns. And you can see we've just got columns A through to G at the moment. And now I want to name these columns. So this is a nice sort of new feature in Worksheet Design mode. I can select a row that contains column names and then do a right click, define headers, and you can see it automatically names all the columns based on the column headings there. Important to note that this is a snapshot. This is not sort of doing any dynamic correlation between the field names and the row of data. So in other words, if this format changes later on and we have that scenario where we've got amount through to AMT, it's not going to automatically rename this to amount for us. So if that's something you do need to do, I'll quickly go through how we can do that. But just at this stage, I want to mention, this is exactly the same as manually naming these fields. It's not going to dynamically change this for the future. So that's what you have to do. There isn't any structure in terms of appends and footers here. So we don't really need to use Worksheet Design mode. The big advantage to Worksheet Design mode here is that we can automatically assign it to multiple sheets, and it doesn't matter if those sheet names change. So you see I've got data 1 and data 2 here. In my apply to, by default, it's only applying it to the sheet name that I have active when I'm building the model file. I can, of course, change that. But if I do it by sheet name, then it's still going to specifically look for data 1 and data 2 in the future. So probably the more useful format is typically all worksheets. What this will do now is it doesn't care what the worksheet's called, doesn't care how many worksheets you've got, it'll automatically apply it to as many as there are in the workbook. So I'm going to apply this to data 1 and data 2 straight away. And I'm going to accept that. And here you can see we've got the data from those two sheets. One thing I didn't mention, and one disadvantage, I guess, of Worksheet Design mode, you cannot take data from a named range in Worksheet Design mode. That's only available in database mode. There's a couple of metadata columns that, or one metadata column that I'll bring in here. I'm clicking on metadata columns and bringing in the sheet name. So you can see here we got data 1 and data 2, the two sheet names that we brought in. So again, let me save this this worksheet, a workspace, sorry. Worksheet Design mode. Once again, I'm going to break this so that the workspace won't be able to find that file. Where's my worksheet here? So this time I'm going to bring in format 2 again. Now remember, format 2 was that situation where we had the amount column instead of the AMT column. So the good news is that it now survives it. If I just click on find missing files, it survives it without any errors, and it survives it without any warnings, which means we can now automate it. But again, the thing to bear in mind is you can see it's called AMT. So if we go into Worksheet Design mode here, you can see there's the column called AMT. So even though our data's got amount here, it's still called AMT. Now, of course, we could highlight this. We could do a sort of a manual define headers here. But that's going to cause the same problem of things changing, and you'd have to go through that that mapping solution. So there's one little workaround. If this is going to be a problem for you, and you don't want to sort of be in this situation where you could potentially have old column names from old data. If you want to protect your workspace from that, then you can do this a slightly different way. So what we can do in Worksheet Design mode is if I change my trap here to is non-blank, and get rid of the font and the alignment, which I'll come into in a bit more detail in a moment. You can see what we need to do is to change the trap here so that it's bringing in the column names as data as well. If fact, it's probably quicker to just to redo it, because the problem I've got here is that we've got numeric and date columns, which of course are now not valid and are not showing that display. So actually what I'll do is I'll just quickly delete all these, because obviously you would do this right as you're building the model file the first time. You wouldn't necessarily be redoing this. So I'm just going to add, let's just clear it and get rid of everything. Sorry, I should have add a trap, modify my trap, get rid of the fonts and the alignment, say that it's non-blank. So now you can see I've got this column in as well. Now I can re-add the fields because it now they're all going to get set to character. So I'm going to see this first row of data, which I was missing to start with. I mean, I'm not going to name these columns dynamically as part of the import process. I'm just going to accept that. So the model is always going to generate columns A through to G. And what I can do in my prepare window is to select this row and then do a, where is it? Set row as column headers. So right click on the row selection, set row as column headers. And you can see that now dynamically bases this name based on the value that's in that file. So it's called amount now, and this is dynamic. I guess I would probably filter this one out. Exclude those. And if I now save this workspace, so this is now called amount. If I break number 2, bring number 1 back in. So I've saved it so that it's looking at number 2 now. So the workspace is going to fail because it can't find format 2. But if I now tell it to find format 1 or format 3, doesn't matter. You can see I don't need to do anything else here. I think I maybe didn't save the workspace. That's frustrating. Okay, so I've made a mistake there. My apologies. That should have worked dynamically straight away. I don't think I saved the workspace. So I won't go through that again. I won't recap it because we're a little bit tight for time already, I think. But my apologies. Hopefully that makes sense as to what it should have done if I had saved the workspace correctly. Excuse me. Just checking questions. PM in file in data prep. So there's a question saying once the Excel file has been brought into data prep, and it wouldn't actually make any difference whether it was using database design or worksheet design once you're in the prepare window. Can you export the file type, a PRN file type, in data prep? So I suppose that's a little bit like reporting or exporting the report window in Classic. So we don't have a report window, we don't have the source window available. I think there is a new ability, if it was a print file, I think you can now export from the report design. I'd need to check into that. I don't know if it will let me do this here without valid data. No, it's not going to. I'll come back to that when I've got some valid data here and just check. I don't think we have the fixed width available here, so I'll need to check that. Oh, Chris has actually answered that as well. So no, I think Chris is confirming what I was thinking. We're not able to export to a fixed width from Data Prep Studio, I'm afraid. Okay, let's close that down and move on to the final format, which actually does genuinely require worksheet design mode. So I can go through the worksheet design mode options in a little bit more detail on this one. So you can see with this one, there's a bit more structure to it. If we open it up in Excel, this is really a bit more like a print file, what we might consider to be a text or a PDF report. Clearly, it's not structured in nice, neat rows and columns. So this would be a bit of a nightmare, pretty much impractical to do in database mode. But worksheet design mode makes it relatively straightforward. So let's have a look at this in worksheet design mode. And we're going to see something that looks pretty much the same as this, it just won't have the logos in it. when we take it into Data Prep Studio. So this is only Data Prep Studio, remember. Can't do this in Classic. So I'm going to say yes to use Worksheet Design Mode. And here's our Worksheet Design Mode. You can see we retain the fonts. So we got company names underlined and in bold. We've got the alignment, the left and right alignment, center alignment, whatever it may be. All of that is retained, font information, color of the background, everything like that. The only thing we don't get is the logos. If you've got, you know, pivot tables, and I think even pivot tables are okay, but if you've got, you know, graphs and logos, they're not going to show up in your worksheet design. So we can now bring this data in using Worksheet Design Mode, very much in the same way that we can bring data in using Classic. So again, I'm going to identify something that allows me to narrow in on my data lines. Just for the sake of a point here, I'm going to use this amount. I probably would use quantity in the real world, because in this case, quantity is the only place where I've got a numeric in my chosen column. Whereas in the amount, you can see we've got a numeric in the totals as well. But just for demonstration purposes, I'm going to do a right click, add trap on this amount column. And you can see it has highlighted the total column, because of course it's a numeric. And if we look at the trap, you can see it's added this trap onto column E here. And it's decided that it's a number, which is great. It's decided that there are some font attributes, but it's not chosen the bold as a significant font attribute. So actually, these might be irrelevant. So I can deselect these. But what is relevant is the fact that my data lines only contain a non-bold character. So if I make it bold, I'm only going to get my total lines. If I negate that bold, I'm now going to get my detail lines. So you see there's lots of flexibility here. We have the sort of the more traditional trapping type options, numeric, date, blank, non-blank, including full sort of Monarch expressions and regular expressions if you need them, but typically you don't. So sort of fairly traditional values here. We've got the font information, which we've needed to use in this case. We've got the alignment, obviously left and right, top, bottom, or center alignment for vertical and horizontal. And we've also got the cell decorations, which are things like the background, whether there's any lines around it, what the color of the background is, or you can see the list there. So we don't need the cell decorations. We don't need the alignment. We actually don't really need the value in this case. I think just okay, yeah, we do, because this doesn't contain a bold. It contains nothing at all, which of course is not bold. So yeah, we do need the value, and we need the font. Or I could have taken the quantity, and then I wouldn't have needed to add that second font component. So hopefully that makes sense. We highlight the fields in the same way, just drag across the top, or I can cherry pick them, of course, add the columns. I will highlight this row and define the headers, remembering this is a one-off sort of copy and paste. Define headers, so it's not dynamic. And that gives us our detail. We now go about adding in the other fields. Again, just for purposes of demonstration, I'm going to use an option that is not ideal, but I need to do that in order to show how we can get around it. So the code here, you can see is a numeric. We've also got a numeric in the description line, but the alignment is I think different, so we can get away with that. But if I do a right click, add trap. Oh, sorry, I made a mistake on there. Let me delete, which trap do we want to delete? So I'm still in my detail at the moment, so my apologies. I've deleted the trap I've just added by mistake to the detail template. What I'm trying to do now is to build an append template to add a new column of data onto the detail. So we would do a new append. I select my line and add the trap. And you can see what it's managed to do is it's differentiated between the code and the description lines based on the alignment of the field, I guess, or maybe it's a slightly different. Oh yeah, the vertical alignment is different. You can see these are top aligned and the receipt is bottom aligned. So that's how it's able to differentiate it. But the problem is, if we scroll down and look here, it's a bit difficult to tell with that trap, so I'm going to remove it. There's nothing that's going to allow us to differentiate between the receipt and the discount, unless we go down the route of maybe using regular expressions or Monarch expressions based on the the scale of the number, which seems like a lot of effort. There's nothing in terms of formatting to allow us to differentiate these. Now, I get away with it here because it's just looking for the latest one that belongs to the detail. So it is actually, as it's working through the report, it's going to be considering this as a suitable value, but it's then going to come down to the discount line and it's going to say, oh, I've got a better value to use here. I'm not going to bother with the receipt. I'll bring in the discount. So the discount is correctly getting a line to it. So we can get away with that. So we'll get away with it, and I'll add the column, and then we can come into the column list and we can just rename this to discount. So let's try the same thing for the receipt number. So again, I'm going to do a right click. Sorry, I've forgotten again to do the new template append. It's a new append, completely separate. I'm going to do the right click, add trap. And now you can see it's gone wrong. Again, because there's no way to differentiate between these two, again, it's considered the receipt, it's found the discount. So even though I've used the receipt line to define it, it's actually going to extract again the discount code because the trap is not able to differentiate it. And I don't think there's anything I could do to this trap to fix that. There's nothing in column B that's different. So what I'll do instead, and what I probably should have done on the discount column as well, I'm going to delete that append 1. Rather than trapping on the field value itself, what I want to do is to trap on the word here. So obviously I could have done this for discount as well. I'll only do it for the receipts. I'll do a new append template, and I'll do a right click. This time add value trap exact match. And you can see what is actually done here is it said I want my field to have the word receipt in it. Obviously it would have been discount if I'd have done it on the other cell. So that's nice and specific. That's never going to cause a problem. I can now come across here and add the field, add the column, sorry, and there's my receipts. So same thing for the cashier, do a newer template. I guess I probably could trap it this time because it's character, but I'll do a value trap again, exact match. Right click on the employee, add the column, there's my cashier. And then the last thing maybe we want is this this company name here. So again, I'll do a right click. This time I'll just do, nearly forgot again, do a new append. I'm going to do a right click, add trap. This time it's actually automatically used the font, the bold and the underline for us, so no issues there. I'm going to do a right click, add column. There's the column. And one extra thing we can do here is on the field properties, is we can come in and we can enable this multi-cell. So we have some options here for multi-line fields. And that's it. Again, I'm going to apply this to all worksheets, although I don't have any others, different names there, but it's just sort of a habit, I guess. And then we've got our data from our worksheet design mode. So again, just to remind us what we started off with, a very structured sort of append and potentially footer type scenario where worksheet or database mode is not going to work for us because it's not in a nice structured row and column based format. So that's a quick overview of worksheet design mode. Just going to check, I don't see any new questions, but I know we have some pre-submitted questions, which I'll come on to. No, okay, I don't see any questions. So a couple of pre-submitted questions. One was relating to, I'm just scrolling down to find it. Okay, so I think one of the pre-registered was the payroll Excel has multiple deduction lines. So that's actually based on the format that we saw there. So in this case, it was a merged field. And you might notice I didn't actually have to do anything even in database mode in Data Prep Studio. I didn't have to do anything. It automatically considered this merged field to belong to every one of those fields. But in classic mode, I had to use that ditto function, that copy value from previous record. So the multiple deductions can get associated with individual clients. So as long as it's on the same row, you can get away with it in database mode by using the ditto. So if this was not a merged cell, if it was only in the top one and these were genuine empty cells underneath it, we'd see the empty cells here as well, and we'd have to use that ditto function. So there's a question about the file function. So in Monarch Classic, you can create a calculated field using the file function, and that will give you the name of the source file. So that's really useful if you're if you're exporting and you want to know where the data's come from. You can include that file name as part of the export. And you can also then maybe burst the export based on file name, or email it on key based on the file name, and all these sorts of extra things. There is no file function in terms of a calculated field in Data Prep Studio, but there is a metadata column for it. So we go down to metadata columns, and you'll see here we have a source file name. So this is the same as the file function and it's obviously a very long field. The file function, so all the way out the end here, I've got the eventual path. So what we would often do in Classic, we'd then have to use the split function to get the bit we want. Being Data Prep Studio, we can just do a split function here into parts from the right, based on the slash, and then I just want one part. Have I done that the right way around? We want to limit the split. So there you go. So we only split it once, so we limit it to the first split, and that gives us the actual name. So in this case, obviously, it's all coming in from the same file. Okay, so yeah, that's metadata columns. That gives you the equivalent of the file. So there was another question. So one of the new features of Data Prep Studio version 2023.1, I don't think I'm going to be able to do it here because I've not connected it to a server library. But you can see you can now save workspaces to the server library. We've been able to do that in Classic for quite a while, but until this latest version, we've not been able to save directly to the Monarch server library. So we can do that. That wasn't specifically the question. There was an ancillary question to that saying, how can you save the workspace without a file attached to it? So the direct answer to that is you can't, because the workspace is similar to a project file, and the workspace contains not only all of this extraction stuff, but also the definition to the path to the file you're using to bring that data in. But what you can do is you can override it in Automator. So I guess if you were concerned about not wanting to have sensitive data, what I would do is just I don't think I've really got any text files here, but this is a brand new laptop, by the way, so I'm enjoying the speed, but I don't have my normal sample files here. So we have our file with all of our data, and let's say it's sensitive data. So we drag that in. I didn't save it, I guess. Save. I've already got it open. Sorry. Yeah, I think this yeah, they've upgraded Notepad on this version of Windows. I'm not used to, so I had it in a different window. Okay. Don't save that one. Save that one. Maybe I opened it 3 times. Right, apologies for that. That took much longer than it should have. So no, grief. I'm doing something wrong with. How can I do something wrong with Notepad? File, save. Okay, eventually. What we would do is we'd do the detail template, obviously extract all of our data in the normal way. I guess the question has come about the fact that this may be sensitive data, and the customer doesn't want to save this sensitive data. So what I think you need to do is to build the workspace based on the actual data, but then before you save the workspace, I would just come down here and edit the file path and just browse out to an empty file. So all of your workspace is going to be defined with any transformations, all those sorts of things are going to be saved, but the actual file is going to be an empty file associated with it. And then you can override that in the automator process. You would just feed it a different file. So hopefully that's answered that one. And the last one, I think, is relating to SQL. So let me go to a different server. The last question is relating to exporting SQL and mapping files in SQL. Now this is something that should be working relatively straightforward. So if it's not working for this customer, and I don't think the gentleman is on this call, so we'll get in touch. But just for general reference, the question relates to exporting to SQL. And it looks like the mapping in SQL is not working. So for the purposes of the recording, I guess, that we can pass on, I think what it may be, you have to remove this export all to start with. You can see we don't have the column mapping available with the export all ticked. This is only relevant for exporting to SQL or ODBC, OLADB data sources. So we need to remove the export all, and then you should be able to come into the column mapping. So it may be just a case of the mapping not working. So that had some old mapping in it. So I've clicked on the auto map, and you can see my destination columns are completely empty at the moment. That's because this file doesn't exist in the SQL database at the moment. So it knows what it's exporting from Monarch, but it doesn't know what it's exporting to. So when you try and do the mapping, when you try and edit the mapping, there is no target field available. So what we need to do is to have that file available. So if I just export it once and create the file, I'm just waiting for the export to finish. And then come back into this export mapping. Remove the export all, come into the column mapping. Now you see when we export, when we edit one of these pairs, we can choose where it's going. And obviously at the moment I've got one-to-one correlation here, so I've got nothing spare. So if I could delete maybe G and H, and now I can choose where column F goes to anything that's not already used. So my column F can map to column H. And obviously if I didn't have all those columns available, or if I had different columns available in the database that's been created, I could match column F to whatever that column happened to be called in the database that's on the SQL server. So I'm guessing it's a question around whether the database already exists, or maybe the service account doesn't have permissions to read the database table and get the database structure. I think we maybe need a support session to go into that in more detail, but it should be working. It should just be a case of making sure that export all is not ticked, and then you should be able to come into the column mapping. Okay, I think that's all of the questions.
Yeah, so okay. I know we have about 4 minutes, so actually all right.
Just got something to add quickly to that question about the PRN, if there's time, Rebecca.
Oh yeah, go ahead. We have like three minutes.
No, it won't take long. So there is a new option to export the report window in the very latest version of Data Prep Studio. So we can export the report window the same as you can in Classic, but we're not able to export from the table as a fixed width PRN. So I don't know specifically which one you wanted to do there, but we can do one of them.
And we'll save that answer for next session too, since we're going to want to show what to do.
Yeah, okay, cool.
Right. let me make mine. Thank you so much. Thank you, Steve.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you.
Bye-bye.